Ladies and gentlemen, why do we all love chess so much? Chess is a game that captivates the mind. It exposes our strengths, our weaknesses, our insecurities. Sometimes it makes us feel terrible, and sometimes it makes us feel elated, ecstatic, euphoric, and extremely smart. And in today's video, I will be showing you a game where all of those emotions were experienced by the player with the black pieces, who played one of the most sensational games I've ever seen, and he got 5 brilliant moves. The game was less than 20 moves long, which means over a quarter of the game was brilliant. It was an incredible game. It's gonna make you smile, I promise. And before we jump into the game, I'm not thanking the sponsor of today's video, but some of you know this, some of you might not. I've written a book. Now, the book is not physically out yet. It's in pre-order. But today, I'm announcing that I have partnered with a massive bookstore here in New York City called Strand to give you 500 copies signed by me if you pre-order them. Only 500. The first 500 people do so. I will go to the store, physically go to the store, and sign the book. If you would like, you can check out the link in the description. Otherwise, you'll just have to buy a book and hope that you see me one day and then I'll sign it for you. This will be a signed copy edition. Of course, if you just want to pre-order it, period, the link will be in the description as well, in case you're not interested necessarily in a signed copy. So, wanted to announce that the first 500, then it's gone. All right, limited edition. Check it out if you'd like. This was a game played between Grandmaster Pranesh from India and Grandmaster Zhu Yi from China. And sometimes you just gotta shut up, sit back, watch some really nice chess. Now, White began this game with e4, and Zhu Yi played e5. Zhu Yi plays e5, plays it all the time. And against knight f3, already, by the way, can I just say, like, I hate to backseat the Grandmaster. I mean, seriously, no Vienna. I mean, every season GothamChess viewer knows you gotta play 2 knights c3. But he plays knight f3. Fine. Knight f6 by black. And Zhu Yi likes to play the Petrov defense. So he counterattacks the pawn in the center. He doesn't play the traditional knight to c6. This is one of the most reputable openings in chess. You could play it in the style of Eric Rosen, where after knight takes e5, you play what's known as the Stafford Gambit, which is a completely refuted opening, but not at intermediate levels. After knight e5, black will play d6 and then take back on e4. However, in this game, Pranesh plays the move knight c3, and now we have what's known as the 4 knights. The 4 knights traditionally is the most boring opening in chess. Like, I don't know if there's another one. It's just very symmetrical. However, recently, and it's symmetrical because beginners will play bishop c4, bishop c5, castles, pawn d3, pawn d6, h3, h6. Like, they just copy each other. Because that's what you learn when you're 5 years old. That's why I was imitating a 5-year-old. Maybe you're 45 and you sound like that. Listen, I'm not judging. But nowadays, grandmasters, especially because they get to play much more Title Tuesday, they get to play more online. In fact, the amount of games that were played between 2020 and 2023 online supersedes anything in the past. So now grandmasters are like experimenting in different positions, and they're going to underground grandmaster norm parties where they all get naked and oiled up and discuss playing bishop b5 on the 4th move. The move bishop b5 applies a little bit of pressure to the knight and also by extension the pawn on e5. Now, black has a lot of moves here. Now, in this game, black did this, which is a very provocative move. More on that in a second. Black can also develop the bishop. Magnus Carlsen has played the move bishop b4, just sort of saying, all right, you want to play bishop b5, I'll play bishop b4. And then, castles. White sometimes takes the knight on c6 and then takes here. Or white doesn't do that at all. White just does this, and then black does this. Magnus has played a game like this. So you can just mirror your opponent. Also, recently, black has played bishop d6, just like stubbornly and in a very ugly way defending the pawn on e5 from the knight, but basically saying, look, now it makes no sense for you to do this because, well, you don't actually win my pawn. But yeah, I mean, those are all options. But Zhu Yi plays knight d4, which is a very provocative move. Very, very provocative move. White here plays bishop c4 back. Now, Why is this provocative? Because knight takes e5 is a free pawn, but queen e7 comes in like this. And that's actually very reasonable for black. It's also a provocative move because you're kind of breaking the rules of chess. Like, you're not supposed to move a piece 2 times in the opening, but it works out fine here because of the way that white's position is set up. So knight d4 is played, and Pranesh brings the bishop back to c4, which applies a little bit of pressure there, and knight takes e5. Now, you would think here black needs to play d6 to defend the pawn. Nope, bishop c5. Well, what about the pawn? Now, white could castle and play d3 and develop and just be solid, but he no, I'm pretty sure that's just a free pawn. And in this position, Zhu thinks and plays queen e7. Now, there's another option. Of course, he can play castles. Queen e7 attacks the knight on e5. And in the game, Pranesh went back to d3, targeting the bishop on c5, which looks like a very reasonable move. However, there is a line here in modern theory that is utterly ridiculous. I'm going to show it to you just to show you how completely insane chess openings are. In this position, white sometimes retreats this way. And if white castles and consolidates, white is just a pawn up. So black needs to act fast. So what black will do here is sacrifice another pawn. White will capture it with the bishop, and instead of capturing back or attacking the bishop, black will go here and pin the knight to the queen. Now, white will play the move pawn to d3, stabilizing the center a little bit more. Black in many of these positions will play something like long castles, and white will do something like develop the bishop to e3, and it looks everything is good. But here, black will play knight takes d5, and sack the rook! After e takes d5, black won't even do anything right away. Black will play rook e8. White will oftentimes attack the knight to kick it out. Knight f3, gf3, now queen h4, pinning the pawn to the king, pinning the bishop to the king, so white will make a run for it, but now black sacrifices the other rook! Rook e3, fe3, queen f2 check, if queen e2, bishop e3, and bishop f3 wins the queen. So king c1, bishop e3 check, king to b1, bishop f3 is a fork. Now queen e1, bishop h1, queen e2 hits this, and the game ends in perpetual check. Because if white does this, bishop c5 and it's mate. So queen c4, king b1, and the game ends in a draw. Swear to God, that's how the line goes. So if white goes knight f3 and both players know 20 moves of theory, the best thing that can happen is it ends in a draw. It's utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. D5, like this is all the top engine move, and the game is in a draw. So I don't know if they knew that. I don't know. All right, I didn't ask the players. Instead, Pranesh plays knight to d3. All right. Now, still, Zhu Yi plays the move d5. Thinks for a while. Still plays the move d5 because he's not worried about this. Because after this, the knight is actually stuck. It cannot return home. So, bishop takes d5. He still plays d5, right? He has to play this move. And for a very brief moment, he is down 2 pawns. But he's not worse. How is that possible? How is white not just clearly better despite being 2 pawns up? Well, that's the brilliancy of the position. The knights standing in front of the central pawns actually don't do white any favors. White would much rather this knight be over here so he could put this pawn into the center, or he would much rather have that knight be over there so he could play c3. But he can't. He can't do either of those things, and Zhu Yu just backs up. He sacrifices a second pawn and just backs up. What? So sometimes to make a chess game really, really brilliant, by the way, pre-order the signed copy of the book. Sometimes to make a chess game really brilliant, you gotta be deviant. All right, you gotta be a little bit deviant, be a little bit edgy. The point is that if white just sort of lackadaisically castles, black plays bishop g4. White loses because f3, there is all sorts of nasty stuff here. And if you play queen e1, you actually get your queen trapped, which is sort of gross. That's a really gross way to get your queen trapped. Just can't go anywhere. So seeing that, white played bishop to b3 and was ready to meet the move bishop to g4 with the move f3. All right. Now, in this position, Zhu Yi castles, and white castles, okay? And he castles because the pawn on c2 has been protected. Remember a moment ago I just told you, you cannot castle here because after bishop g4, queen e1, there is knight c2, and you lose your queen. Which is why Pranesh played bishop b3, which would defend the pawn, and then after castles, bishop g4, he would be able to play queen e1 and defend the pawn, right? Now, at this point, I am going to be removing the evaluation bar, so you stop obsessing over it, and instead, you just pay attention to what happens in this incredible game. So, bishop g4, you cannot play f3 because knight f3 and discovered attack, so you play queen e1 and life is good, right? This is defended. That's it. You got out of it. Now you're going to play king to h1, like black is going to bring a rook. You're going to play knight f4, pawn to d3, bishop e3, and you're going to be in good shape. Right? Welcome to the jungle. It gets worse here every day. In this position, Zhu Yi begins the absolute decimation of the white position and the absolute decimation of white's soul. In this position, Zhu Yi plays the move knight f3 check. The first, brilliant move. Sacrificing a full knight. Okay. Well, you gotta take it, otherwise you're gonna lose the queen. Bishop takes. What the heck is the idea? Like, okay, obviously the idea is queen d7, queen g4 mate, or queen h3, but you can't even do that. Like, let's say we just give the move back to black. Like, if black plays queen d7 to try to play here, white's just going to go knight e5, hitting this and then taking the bishop. So what is the idea? Well, the idea is that it's not just queen d7, queen g4, or queen h3. The idea after bishop f3 is black can also move the knight and play queen h4. So naturally, to prevent knight g4, we play the move h3. That way, when black moves the knight to try to get the queen to g5, we simply run. And by the time you arrive with mate, I'm there. So, how can this possibly work? I just play pawn to h3, stopping knight g4. And queen d7 doesn't work because knight e5 and I take. h3, stopping knight g4, stopping queen d7. Brilliant move number 2. Knight g4 anyway. Oh, we got a problem. Oh, we got a problem. We miscalculated something. Well, as it turns out, the move h3 did not stop knight g4, because after pawn takes g4, there is simply queen h4, and you lose. Brutally, I may add. The bishop stands around an entire barracks of soldiers and just laughs at everybody. There's nobody can get to the pieces. And the bishop on b6 covers that, by the way. If white's queen could go to e3, like a move ago, if instead of the move h3, white could play queen e3 and not get the queen taken, white would be completely winning. But this bishop serves one purpose, and it's to stop the queen from going to e3. It's ridiculous. So, knight g4, with the intention of playing this or this and going to the h-file and delivering a checkmate. Well, white plays the move knight e2. Obviously trying to get to f4, because we know queen h4 is coming, and queen h3, so I'm just going to move my knight there and defend the pawn on h3, and now you can't get into my position. So I'm fine. And then I'm going to play this and get rid of your bishop. Except now here comes brilliant move number 3, queen h4 anyway. 3 brilliant moves, re-sacrificing the knight on g4 because of queen h3, queen h1, excuse me. Knight f4 though, right? Knight f4, hold on a minute, it's not over. And if black doesn't find a way in right now, like you can't go queen g3, right? This is pinned, but I'll take you. Can't go here. So what does black do now? What does black do now? I'll tell you what he does. g5! Forcibly removing the knight from the defense. Now, white still can defend here. Pawn to d4. It's not over. It's not over. If I'm successful in creating a barrier against your pieces, I will survive this game. I will survive this game. So in this position, black plays the move, pawn takes knight, and now knight takes f4. Now, that can still be taken in the future if queen h1's not made. Now black plays bishop takes d4. Brilliant move number 4. Because you still cannot take the knight because of mate. All of this pressure is building up. The last 2 brilliant moves were, you know, a little bit, you might say, oh, it's not really brilliant because you can't really take all this stuff. White plays bishop e3. Zhu Yi now plays the best move again, which is bishop e5. Getting out of the way, giving this up, this square, and reapplying pressure over here. And it still looks like, how do you break through, right? Queen a5. The idea of queen a5 is to meet this with a swarming checkmate, with queen g5 check, and potential counterplay on the black king. Queen a5 is a very clever idea, but it fails. You know what it fails to? It fails to the fifth and most brilliant move of all. This move order would be too slow, so instead, Zhu Yi played queen takes h3! Oh my goodness! With the intention of playing queen to h1 mate or queen to h2 mate, and if knight takes h3, bishop h2, cross, apple, sauce, and everything is defended, everything hits the king. This is utterly brutal. This is so brutal. Queen takes h3, and white resigned with checkmate to arrive on the next move with international overnight shipping brought to you by FedEx. FedEx, sponsor your mans. All right, not a sponsored piece of content. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Queen takes h3. All of this began when white thought the pressure of the opening was over. Knight f3 arrived on the doorstep, and after that it was an avalanche. Impossible move after impossible. g5, the bishop dropping back to e5, and the haymaker. Queen takes h3, headshot, dead. Spectacular stuff. I mean, wow. This is so beautiful. Is what you'll be saying if you get a signed pre-order brought to you by Strand. No, just kidding. And if you're watching like in the future and the book is out, just get the book. Book is great. Right now it's not out. At the time of recording, it's going to be out in 5 months, but maybe it's like 2026 or something. What a game. I'm just breathtaking. And black was able to do this because white's pieces were stuck in front of pawns. So put pawns in the center faster. Center pawns both block your opponent's pieces out and activate your own. Cool? Fantastic. Now get out of here.